Muslims have always been parroting the claim that there is only one Quran which has been preserved dot by dot, letter by letter since the time of Muhammad to this day, and there is no variance whatsoever. They always bring this argument when debating Christians claiming there are different Bibles all over the world. They talk of King James Bible, NIV, ESV and the rest, not knowing these are just different English translations of the same message. They bring textual variants of Bible manuscripts as proof of corruption, but what they don't know is if these are what they deem as corruption, then they would have to throw their Quran in the bin, because a little research will show you that there are different Arabic Qurans in different parts of the world, with verses contradicting each other, and there are variants in the Quranic manuscripts also. The question we should be asking is, where did Muslims get the lie that the Quran has stayed the same from the time of Muhammad? You guessed right, from their scholars. Take Sheikh Yasir Qadhi as he speaks to the common Muslim audience.
So the Caliph Uthman standardized the copies of the Quran, and therefore from his time up until our time there has never been two copies of the Quran that are different even in one letter or one word.
You just heard Sheikh Yasir Qadhi saying that every copy of the Quran in the world today is identical and there is no difference even in one letter or a word. Now the question we should be asking is, does Yasir Qadhi believe in what he is saying, or he was just lying to the common Muslim audience? Because the same Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, when speaking to the people he calls students of knowledge, which are the Muslims who are studying to become scholars of Islam, he said this.
In other words, if you were to compare two printed Qur'ans, you're going to see differences between them. And this is something that many people are unaware of and many people have heard but are not fully familiar with, especially those who have been exposed to some of our brothers who live in Algeria or Morocco or other North African countries. They recite the Quran in a slightly different way. Not just a voice or not just a speaking style, but also changes in letters and words and harakat.
Here you see Sheikh Yasir Qadhi refuting the other Sheikh Yasir Qadhi and admitting there are different Qurans in different parts of the world with different words and letters. So in one place he says,
so the Caliph Uthman standardized the copies of the Quran, and therefore from his time up until our time there has never been two copies of the Quran that are different even in one letter or one word.
And to a different audience he refutes himself by saying,
in other words, if you were to compare two printed Qur'ans, you're going to see differences between them.
Question to the Muslims here. Why do your scholars have to lie to you all the time if Islam is the religion of truth? Your scholars know this because Dr. Shabir Ali agreed with the second Sheikh Yasir Qadhi about the different variants of the Quran, and he even admitted that the scholars knows about this stuff.
This cuts away at the sense of complacency that many Muslims have gone around with, thinking that, okay, everything has been preserved dot for dot, letter for letter, the way it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, with no variation or change whatsoever. That it cuts at that general sense, which actually is not a scholarly way of thinking about the Quran. Our scholars have always known and have always described in our classical books variations and manuscripts, like, it's read like this by Ubay bin Ka'b, it's read like this by Ibn Masud and so on, and in the Codex of Ibn Masud it was seen to be written like this, in the Codex of Ubay bin Ka'b it was seen to be written like this with this or that variation. So these were always known in scholarly circles to have existed, but recently average Muslims have just simply without bothering to learn, they have just simply parroted a common way of speaking about the Quran and saying, it's 100% the way it's always been, and they cannot imagine any variation.
And it looks like most Muslims read the Quran in a text which is referred to as the Egyptian edition of 1924.
Today, most Muslims read the Quran in a text that is referred to as the Egyptian edition of 1924. But this is not the only text of the Quran that is read throughout the world. In North Africa, there is a slightly different text that is based on a slightly different reading, mostly corresponding to what we read in the rest of the world. And then too, in some parts of Africa, there is another reading of the Quran and a matching manuscript that is prevalent. And here too, we find some slight variations.
When your entire religion is based on your scholars deliberately lying to you, the logical thing to do is to ask yourself that if everything they have been telling you, like Quran preservation and scientific miracles in the Quran, which I made a video about where we saw Ali Dawa saying it has all been debunked. What else are they lying to you about? Stay away from Islam and save yourself from eternal condemnation. Now, Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, what would you leave us with?
When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. Standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. The standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say.
Thank you.